All right. So I want to welcome everybody to our webinar tonight on the resolution process. And this came about a little over a year ago. We had a member join our Riverton Grange in Barkhamsted, Connecticut, and she drafted 2 resolutions. And she thought the process was interesting. And so I wanted to create an opportunity for folks really to understand the process. And the other night, since this has been National Grange Month, when we were on the National Grange Legislative Roundtable, Phil Veneta mentioned that he thinks one of the coolest things about Grange is how an individual or group of people or a local Grange or a Pomona or even state Grange can take resolutions all the way up to the national level. And he thought that was really a kind of unique thing about our organization. So he was really pleased we were going to be doing this. So Noel Miller, who chairs our Connecticut State Grange Legislative Committee, and I, who am the Connecticut State Grange lecturer, said, let's do a webinar. We're going to record it for people to use for the future. So we'd like to begin with our Connecticut State Grange president, Rob Buck, who is here with us, just to say welcome.
Well, everybody, I thank you for tuning in. I believe that resolutions are obviously very important, as they are our way to impact life in America, legislatively, culturally, and in many ways. The resolution writing process is your way to get your grassroots voices heard at the higher levels, whether it be state government, national government. And it's also the stated purpose of Pomona. Today, Pomonas are struggling to find a purpose, but the stated purpose of Pomona was always to have the legislative function. And the more we know about this, the better. I want to thank Dave, our state lecturer, for setting up the webinar, and I want to thank Vince, who for tuning in from California to do his presentation. I did not get a chance to talk to you a whole lot at National Grange, Vince, but thank you very much for coming east by way of Zoom anyway, to give us your knowledge on the whole process and help us out a little bit.
Grateful to be here.
With that,
thank you, Rob. Thank you. So our legislative committee chair and past state Grange president, Noel Miller, would you like to just quickly give an overview of the resolution process from a Connecticut State Grange perspective? And then we'll have Vince give how to write an impactful resolution.
Okay, thank you, Dave, for doing this and let people know what's going on. I would like to start, the basics of what happens with a resolution. So from last state sessions, I do have a resolution that I want to read so that people can see what a resolution kind of looks like. This one is the tongue-in-cheek resolution. We had number 15, which was the ending of free Viagra and Cialis funding. And the resolution read, whereas the United States Supreme Court revised the ruling of Roe versus Wade, abortion rights for women, stating that pregnancy is God's will. And whereas the Supreme Court has voiced banning contraceptives, birth control, and other female reproductive rights. And whereas the United States government for years have been providing free Viagra and Cialis medication for men who have erectile dysfunctions, which by nature is God's will. And whereas 905,083 prescriptions, or $41.6 million for Viagra, and 185,000 prescriptions, or $22.82 million for Cialis, have been given freely to men in the United States. And whereas the federal government cannot legislate bills to reduce prescription drug pricings for God wills diseases like diabetes, allergic reactions, cancer, and heart disease, therefore be it resolved that the National Grange urge the federal legislators to stop funding free Viagra and Cialis for men's God will lipness. And that was presented to this from a Coventry Grange, our local Grange. And from there, it was passed and then went on to Eastern Connecticut Pomona Grange. And it's encouraged that local Granges submit their resolutions to Pomona Granges. So more community Granges can see what's going to be in the agenda at state session, but also can support it. So it did go to Eastern Connecticut Pomona, where it did pass. Once it passes at a Pomona, or if it fails at Pomona, it could still continue on as a Grange, community Grange resolution. It goes on to the state secretary, where the state secretary gives a list to the state president, and the state president assigns it to one of the sessions committees that meets at the state sessions or the state convention. And there, as we've done since the COVID, the resolutions committees meet by Zoom to go over the resolution is assigned by the president to the committee. So then the committees meet by Zoom and go over their list of resolutions. Usually it's 11 resolutions per sessions committee. And then they come up with a plan for the resolutions. And the action of the committee is there's 3 basic actions that they can do. Is the simplest is that they can recommend it passed as written, or they can take the motion and committee members and amend it or add to it or correct it if there's mistakes that are in it. Or the other is the last they could do is they fail it, but only as a committee, because it has to be brought before the state session. So those are the 3 items that they can do. During their durations, they can change things or improve the language, spelling, grammar of the resolutions. But they cannot, or if they want, they can, if they get numerous similar resolutions, the committee can write one resolution, the better or the best or the best, and make it so that there's one resolution, so they can merge several resolutions. And then from there, when their committee goes to report, the chairman reports on what the action of the committee is. If there's changes to be made from the membership, it can be done by common consent. So if there's a spelling change, a grammar change, or anything like that, it could be done on the floor as a common consent. If it needs to be drastically changed, it goes back to the committee, and the committee has to meet. So no person or the chairman can't change the resolution as presented or approved by the committee by themselves. Or they have, the whole committee has to meet, or the majority of the committee has to meet, so they can redo the resolution. And then it's brought before the state session, and that's where it's every delegate that goes to the state session has a copy of the resolutions. If there's changes to the resolutions, the new resolution is presented to the president, the vice president, the board of directors, and the secretary and the treasurer. So there, and then it's projected in front of the membership and read in title for them to act on, and then the resolution can pass or fail. At this state session, this one did fail. For some reason, people they laughed at it, but they didn't want to see it go on to national. But if it did go to national, the only part that goes from Connecticut that Connecticut's always approved is the therefore be it resolved sections. So that's where, when you write a resolution, it has to be fully understandable so that the therefore be it resolved addresses what you're looking for with the title of the resolution. That's what we look for. And if the president is there and has a copy of the resolution, then he can present the resolution itself. When it goes to National Grange, it's a similar thing where they have committees that go over the resolutions. But the Grange, the committees can one, determine that it's a Grange policy, so therefore they won't act on it. Or they can say it's a state issue, and therefore they won't act on it because it's a state issue. They could ask the president to, it could be an adverse condition that they say it's against the Grange, what the Grange is saying, so they could ask the president of that Grange to withdraw the resolution, or it can be presented for a pass or fail. But the state master has the opportunity to say, I want that resolution to go on to the pass fail, yet that president has to present it and then defend it for a pass or a fail. And if it does fail, then it's dead. The other important things are resolutions that are written, especially if they're determining with the bylaws of the state granges or the national grange. There's a time frame that they have to be presented before. And in Connecticut, it's usually 30 days for the change of the bylaws, that it has to be presented before 30 days before the state session, so that it can be listed on, as we do, presented in the Granger as a potential bylaws change. If they're not, if they bring up at the state session, then they are dead because they violate the bylaws. They're not a 30-day and not advance notice of it. And majority of it is 2/3 vote, either by state Grange or by national Grange. And if it's a change to the bylaws or even to the national, to the digest, the national is a two-year vote. You vote first time the first year, and then you have to vote on it the second time the second year. And Connecticut is also at times on that. But it's just a recognition that it's a process that hopefully is well thought of, and people that are on the committees or the people that write the resolutions, that it's a well nurtured thing and it lives up to the name of the Grange. And that's all I have for it. But the resolutions that we have, usually Connecticut, we run between 20 and 30 resolutions a year. And a lot of them are good, and a lot of them have been over the past years. We've seen some real
Doozies.
doozies, as they call them. And they make it exciting on the floor and all that. But my last comment I have about the resolution I read, just to let you know, this year with this Texas judge that has taken on the CDC, there is concerns now about Viagra and Cialis because will fall under the same category as this birth control pill or this abortion pill that they're fighting against and all that stuff, because it's not attested, or hasn't been tested, because actually for cardiac or arrest on Viagra and all that is more prevalent than the abortion pill that they're claiming is hazardous to the life of people. So you may see a resolution, not to this one of defunding, but preserving the freeness of Viagra and Cialis. So it's just a funny world we're in, and we try to do the best we can on resolutions, and it's part of the Grange history. Our grassroots is grassroots, and it's the important things. So I thank you, Dave.
So who thought on a Sunday night on this stimulating webinar, we'd be talking about Viagra and Cialis and all these other topics. So look at the fun Grangers have. So our featured speaker tonight is Vince Scholten, and I've gotten to know Vince. We're serving together on the National Policy Committee on Hemp and Cannabis. And as many know, I had asked to be put on this because when I was recruiting new members, it was the top question people were asking me, what is the Grange policy on hemp and cannabis? And it was the big topic here in Connecticut over the recreational marijuana issue. So Vince was on that, and he is very knowledgeable on that topic. And then we've got talking about resolutions, because through that policy committee, we're doing some education around the country for folks. But Vince is not only the vice president of the California State Grange, and Vince, of course, that was my former home, California, when I lived in San Diego before I came back home. And he's also the chair of the Agriculture Committee. So Vince, we're really pleased that you wanted to do this and help educate folks wherever they are in the Grange around the nation about the resolution policy. So Vince, virtually welcome to Connecticut. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I've actually never been to the East Coast yet. So next year will be my first time to the East Coast, which is
Cool.
really odd because I've traveled the world, but I have never been to the East Coast. So
You're going to love
regardless,
it so much. You're going to want to move here and be part of Connecticut State Grange.
probably. So there is a whole lot to resolution writing. I'm going to give you a kind of an overview of how I think that is the best way to do that. I know without getting into all of the particulars with resolutions, you know, when they're due in Connecticut, whether they're your bylaws changes or amendments or just a regular resolution. I find the process absolutely amazing that the Grange can come from your absolute grassroots idea from one person in your Grange Hall, and it can be lobbied on all the way to a national level. And I find the process, I call it wordsmithing, and I work with people all the time across California with trying to put together resolutions that are very meaningful as well as written properly, so that that committee has less work or change, or, you know, a lot of people will write a resolution and they leave it really wide open. And what we want to try to do is fine tune that and get that down to what our exact idea is in how to do that. I do have a page here and I can ship this to you later, but I'm going to kind of go through this and it just goes over the writing process of this, and then I'll answer some questions for you. I think the easiest way to write a resolution is to do it backwards. You actually start with an idea. You know, a word processor really helps because you can change things as you go, but you want to get started with your idea. There's three basic parts: the heading or title, the preambulatory clauses, which are the whereas clauses. I call them my support structure. And then the operative clause, which is the resolution or action statement. And this is where we want to really get started. We want to come up with an idea, and from there, we're going to say, what do we want to do? The idea that is given to me in my how to write a resolution is pesticide diethylene, which is labeled and it's put onto fruits and vegetables. But we're going to write a small resolution today on this, and so you can see how that processes. So step one, there's 6 steps to this process. Step one, you have an idea. For this example, we're going to suppose that it is required that all food products treated with the pesticide diethylene be labeled with a warning to the consumer. So that is our idea that we're going to start with. Step 2 is you want to start with that resolved. So at the very end, and it should be all caps and be followed by a colon. So you write resolved, colon. Next, add the statement that you want to accomplish. In this case, a warning label if diethylene had been used. Remember that the resolve needs to stand on its own as well. So in other words, if you only had the resolved, you would know that this action was to be taken. So let's look at this resolved, and it would look like this. Resolved that all food products for sale in the United States that are treated with the pesticide diethylene, known as DPA, shall require a warning label advising the consumer that the pesticide was used in the production of this product. So that resolve stands completely by itself. There's no support structure yet for that. And that is what our end result is going to be. The next step in the process is to tell you why we want these warning labels. This is done with a series of one or more whereas statements. Each whereas should be a single complete statement. Don't run together too much in the whereases. Again, the word whereas should be all caps, followed by a colon. If more than one whereas is to be used, add a comma at the end, followed by and. So if the whereas is the last one before the resolve, finish the line with a comma and the words, therefore be it. So here's a good supporting statement of whereas for this diethylene. The pesticide diethylene, known as DPA, is commonly applied to 80% of all apples, except for organic apples. And it is used to prevent storage, scald, blacking, or browning of the apple skin when it is in cold storage. Whereas the use of DPA has been banned in the European Union over safety concerns. Therefore be it. And step 4, we're going to want to create a title for this resolution. Again, simple and to the point. And it's the best request when some of the action is part of the title, but that's not necessary. So our title could be require warning labels with diethylene, or when diethylene is used. So that could be your heading. Step 5, after the title, it is recommended that you indicate who is submitted the resolution. Since the resolution will be used to establish Grange policy, use the name of your Grange. So submitted by my Grange number 100 or whatever Grange you're submitting that under. Step 6, almost done. Now rearrange the parts you created above in the following order to complete the resolution. Title, submitted by, whereas, and you're resolved. And the final step is to present that to your Grange and ask them to adopt it and send it to the State Grange. So this is kind of my overview of my 6 steps. There's a couple of key things in here that I want you to remember. We don't want any abbreviations of any kind. So like in this resolution where the DPA, if I was just to write that as a DPA, maybe next year DPA might stand for something else. And so we want to make clear that before that DPA, we're going to write actually diethylene and then put the DPA right next to it in parentheses. The reason for that is that things change over time, and we want this resolution to stand on its own for as long as we need it to be there. I know that we try in our ag committee to go through our policy and bylaws for agriculture every year, if not every other year, to pull out stuff that's no longer relevant. So let's say, DPA 10 years from now stands for some other chemical. We don't want to create a confusion there. And so that's why any abbreviations, we want to spell them out. Keep in mind that all of your resolutions could start on a local level, a state level or a national level. If they are on a local level, you obviously want to get your Grange halls around you on board with what your resolution is, pass it in your Grange hall and pass it in the other Granges that are in that county. If you're going to want to pass it on a state level and it's a state issue, then you want to, I usually take my resolutions to the Pomona, and that way I'm getting a feel for whether people like it or they don't like it, or if I need to fine tune it or, make some changes to it. And then there's the national level. So you feel that your resolution should actually make change across the United States in all of our Grange halls. Then at the very bottom, after you're first resolved, we will always put a second resolve that says, upon passing of this resolution on a state level, that it be submitted to the national Grange. And so that's usually a second resolve. So that's a second ask in your resolution, very specific. And sometimes, stuff will go to a national level and they go, well, this is really a states' rights issue, or it's already policy. And it gets pushed back for those reasons. There's only a couple of reasons for that. Otherwise, they have to look at it and agree with it or not agree with it. You can create resolutions for almost anything. There's a whole lot of committees in the Grange, not just agriculture or water. There's health, taxes. We used to have a gentleman that submitted the same resolution year after year. And we always got a kick out of it because he wanted to get rid of the penny. And his resolution was to get rid of the penny. It usually get as far as the state level and then just not go anywhere from there. But it was funny because he really had an affinity to get rid of that penny. And he said, one of these years, people are going to catch on. And it still kind of is funny for me. He has passed on and we still want to put in resolutions because it was usually a big kick for us because it was a lively debate, which was quite fun to, I really enjoy the debate on the floor when you have a room full of people that are very intelligent and they're putting in their 2 cents. And they bring up ideas that in most cases I wasn't thinking about or I didn't think about and are really good ideas. So keep in mind that resolved has to stand on its own. So I guess I should ask some questions because I felt like I went through that very quickly.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Karen McDonald. Thank you. In writing resolutions, some people under the whereas sections have almost no detail to justify what they're after, and others go into long, the whole evolution of history. Any comments about how to make that the just right amount of description in the whereas section, please?
So they should be supporting statements. It should support your resolved. Your whereases are your reasons for why the resolved should be the way it is. And so the more general you make that, the less credibility you have. The more detailed you make that with, sightings from this or that, what do you call it? I went blank for a second. When they do studies on different things, if you can cite those specific studies, dates, times, places that people can look it up, you're adding a whole lot of credibility to your whereas statements, which support your resolves.
So before
clear and concise.
So Vince, before we take any more questions, Terry Fazio is going to share with us some resources that we have available. I do want to just highlight to everybody, if they haven't noticed, we do have our National Grange lecturer with us, Ann Bircher, and who I report to through my state lecturer function. Love working with Ann, and I'm so glad she was able to join us tonight. So Terry, why don't you share some resources that we have available, and then we'll go do questions and answers, because I know there's going to be some questions.
Okay. Do you have it so that I can share my screen?
I do.
Okay. So I have basically 4 different things that I would like to cover that we have for resources available. So let me share my screen here. Hold on one second. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
See.
Okay, so this is our State Grange website. And if you go to our website and you go under Grange information and you go to downloads, and then there's this little drop-down form and you select legislative, you will see we have a whole list of things here that are available to download regarding the legislative department. And the top 4 things on the list are how to write a resolution, how Grange policy works, and 2 templates that one is a Word document and one's an interactive PDF form that you can use to basically go through the description that Vince just said on how to write a resolution. It gives you the tools on how to do these. You just would click on one of these if you want to download it. It would download right to your computer. But I have these forms here, so I just want to show you what they are. So this is the worksheet basically on this is the fillable PDF. It's very descriptive and detailed, where you can just type in the fields as you're putting your resolution together. This is not what you would submit to the State Grange. This is just or your subordinate Grange. This is just the worksheet that you can use when you're flushing out your thoughts when you're putting a resolution together. It gives you places for your whereases, places for your resolves, some suggestions along the way, the source, the Grange number, etc. So this is available as a Word document and also as a PDF file. The second thing that I have is a Grange policy. Let me make this smaller so you can see the full thing here. This is basically like what Noel was talking about, the process of how a resolution starts in your community Grange and how it works through to Pomona, to the state, to national, and then where it goes from there. So we've got the little flow chart. And then on the second page is basically the format again for how to write a resolution. It's got the different parts, the whereases, the resolve, and it has an example here to show. So this is a 2-page PDF that's available for download. And then the third thing is how to write a resolution. This is a very descriptive 1-page flyer with, this is the heading, this is your clause, this is your subpoints versus your resolve at the end. So it really breaks it down. Basically, this is what Vince said, all thrown into a 1-page flyer. So all of these are available from the State Grange website. Again, if you go to ctstategrange.org, you go to downloads, then you, on the little drop-down menu here, you would select legislative, and all of those are right there ready to be downloaded to your computer. We also have available, as Noel was talking about, there's different policies and things that our State Grange and national has to follow when they're taking these resolutions into consideration. And the Connecticut State Grange publishes a policy handbook every year. So all the policy handbooks are here going back a few years. And easily downloadable in their PDF files as well. So you can see what the policies of the Connecticut State Grange are as you're thinking and compiling your resolutions. Now, if you want to see if something's ever been a resolution before for the Connecticut State Grange, you would then go to state session information. You would go over here to resolutions, and all the resolutions are online, going all the way back to 2003. So we've got roughly 10 years worth of all the State Grange resolutions. It shows the ones that were adopted and the ones that were rejected. So you can read through if you're thinking, oh, well, I think we need a resolution on the 7th degree. As you can see, that passed last year. So if you weren't at state session, didn't know what passed, now you can find that out. Also in the Connecticut Granger, around the time of state session, Todd puts in the resolutions before the session, so people have a chance to study them and see what's coming, and also after the session, so people have a chance to see what was adopted and what was rejected. But all of these are here.
Terry, a question on that. So you can search by year. Could you search by topic?
That's in a different place, but yes, you can. If you go to the home page, there's a search box up here. And you would just type in whatever keywords you wanted and hit search.
Okay.
And then they would show up in a result. So like, let's search, I'll just something.
Like alcohol policy.
See what's going to come back with that. Oops, I hit the one. Try that again. So it comes back with it comes back with resolutions, but it also comes back with all the articles that are about it.
Got it.
Here's all the list of all the resolutions regarding alcohol, going all the way back to 2004.
Okay.
And then these are all the articles that are on the State Grange website that have alcohol within them in one way or another. So including there's some national articles here too. The different dots determine what type of article it is. A gold dot is a national article. Pink dot is a state article. Blue dot is a subordinate article. And if there's a red dot, it's a junior article. If it's a black dot, then it's just a generic community of interest article, something like that the Department of Ag might put out that would be of interest to Grangers. So this search works for anything on the website. But if you want to see specifically the resolutions, you go to Grange information, to state session information, and on the right here, resolutions and results. And then there's the drop-down menu, and you can read the resolution, all the resolutions in full. The only ones that aren't in full are the ones that are at state session, that are submitted on the floor, that I don't necessarily get the full copy of. So those just have, let me scroll down here. It just says resolution submitted at session, what committee it came through and whether it was adopted or rejected, because I don't actually have access to the full text of those. So these are resources that we offer. They're available, like I said, on our website at any time. We have lots of other downloads here as well. There's various forms and promotional information and books and flyers and you name it. That's all broken down by section. So it's something that is useful resources for Grangers. We do have a legislative section on our website. If you go to committees and services, you go to legislative. This is where all of our legislative articles show. So any articles that Noel writes or any of the previous legislative directors write are all here. It gives a little background information on our legislative program. Again, links to downloads of our policy books, some interesting testimonies that have happened over the years, links to National Grange resources for regarding legislative, links to our legislative social media, a link to the download page, and then down here are all of our news article archives. If you just want to scroll through them, you can just scroll through 10, 12 years worth of articles. Actually, the articles technically go back to like 2001 or 2000, I think. So there's lots of articles to scroll through if you just wanted to browse without actually searching. So those are the various resources that we have available. If anybody's interested, and don't want to go to the website to download things, just shoot me an email and then I can email you back whatever forms you need. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And that's what I have for you, Dave.
Thank you very much, Terry. So now it's time for questions from folks. Does anybody have any questions for Vince or Noel or Terry?
I don't have a question, but while I have your attention, I wanted to recognize Eileen Javot from Idaho and thank her for joining us, state president from Idaho. So welcome, Eileen, and thank you for tuning in addition to Ann.
Yes, thank you so much. A question that I had, you do a resolution, and hopefully it goes from your community Grange to your Pomona and then to State Grange. Who at State Grange makes the decision of what committee of jurisdiction it goes to? Is that the state president?
Yes,
And at national, it's the national president?
yes.
Is there any, if you don't agree with who it's sent to, is there any like way to say, I don't think that's where it should go?
Vote them out. No. No, if it goes, if a resolution goes, the state master can take, if it's declined or withdrawn, a state master can take a resolution from his state, his or her state, and present it to the national on his own, on their own merit. But usually it goes through the committee because, you know, at the national Grange, you got 36 states and you got, say, 10 resolutions each state. That's 3,600, 360 resolutions that's going through committees and all that. There could be a lot of work for the time span they have. But they usually they're up to a month or a month and a half before national session starts. And some of them they can't because, like New England, all our state sessions are in September. So they're looking for resolutions to come from the New England states to go so that these national session committees can review and come up with a plan of adoption or whatever of the resolutions.
Karen McDonald, thank you. One more question, thanks. Sometimes a resolution makes it to the committee for discussion, and during that time, someone states, oh, that's already an existing law. I don't know what laws are in our state. Can anybody answer a way to be better prepared to know if something is already on the books somewhere?
That would be the national and the state journals of proceedings. And they don't really say it's existing law, it's an existing policy, is what they say.
I guess
Sometimes-
I'm thinking more of Connecticut state laws. Sometimes we're making comments or recommendations about state laws.
Of the actual state laws.
If
Okay.
it's blue, if it's the blue book of the legislative laws, state laws, we have no knowledge unless we review in advance, but we don't review in advance. The only advance we have is seeing, and usually it's from a committee member saying, no, that's a state law, or that's already a state law or something like that. So we can the committee should investigate that to see if in fact it is a state law or it isn't a state law. But any resolutions, should be able to be presented, but it may not be voted down because it's either policy. We've had a couple of those that are already state Grange policy or national policy, but we don't know about it. It's not in the blue book, pink book. It's not in the legislative handbook and all that, but people remember things more than we do.
Thank you.
I think what is coming out of this, and I, correct me if I'm wrong, but the best way to check state laws or state statutes is to go to the Connecticut library in Hartford. All the laws are posted there. Or I think a secondary question is how do we access the electronic versions of the laws on ct.gov?
The Connecticut general statutes are very widely available on the state website. You're looking, I can't tell you exactly where it is, but you're looking for what they call CGS, the Connecticut general statutes. I find that Google's a very good friend when you're trying to find out what has already been adopted in Connecticut. It'll at least point you in the right direction.
Vince, did you have your hand up?
I did. I was going to say, Google can really be your friend here and do a lot of that research for you. And then I was going to add too is little small words can make a big difference here. So if you in your resolve to have a standalone statement, and you're specifically asking for the Connecticut State Grange shall lobby or should lobby or, or should encourage or should support, those are all different things. Is there a monetary thing that the Connecticut State Grange would have to pay into this? So then it would be support. If it's that we want the State Grange to, encourage that lobbying, we could say, we want to say that, encourage lobbying, or shall lobby for, those little minor, and I call it wordsmithing. I find that really, really important for people to kind of read that resolution and go, can this resolve stand by itself? And a lot of times, especially when we go through our policy book, we will be there with 3 or 4 of us all Googling different things that are, that we can find on the internet. So if you are not sure about a law or regulation, look up the Connecticut state laws on your Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever search engine that you're using, and it will really, really be helpful for you.
I have the link to the general statutes for Connecticut. If anybody wants it, I just texted it to Todd and Dave. Anybody else wants it, just shoot me a note. I can send you a link in an email where you could just click and go, and it gives you all the statutes for the state. They're all digitized.
You can also just type in Connecticut general statutes in your bar and it'll pull it right up. It'll take you directly to the statutes.
Another thing, and I'm not sure who's to answer this. I heard that I don't know how to ask this. If a state turns down a resolution at our state Grange convention, it's dead. It can't go on to national.
Correct.
Okay. And could someone explain that when you go to your state convention and you're a community Grange or I guess community or Pomona Grange delegate, you're assigned to a committee so that folks watching this, at least from Connecticut, understand that? Does that make sense, Noel?
Yeah, the president puts the Granges on the committees. So he makes up with what the committees are and divides up the task between the community Granges.
I would add too that, Dave, you mentioned, okay, a resolution gets rejected or it's turned down, like sometimes at national, they get turned down in committee. Actually, last year, my committee had a resolution that we killed it in committee and we did not bring it to the floor. But if something is turned down, maybe the person who wrote it has a strong feeling and that idea of that resolution, and maybe it's just a matter that it needs to be rewritten and resubmitted in a slightly different tack than it was presented the first time. So just because something dies the first time doesn't necessarily mean it's 100% dead.
Got it. I was gonna, George, go ahead.
I would just say, when I was state president, we had that resolution on upping the price of $1,000 and more when a Grange property was sold. And they came to me and told me they were going to, if I would withdraw it, and I told them no, and I thought it was important. And he said, well, we're going to vote it down. So they did vote it down. And when it came to time for when the chairman of the committee went up to pass all the resolutions that they turned down, I got up and I asked for an adverse on that bill and explained what I thought about why it should have been increased. And then what they do is they vote to bring it back or not to bring it back. Well, I got it back on the floor. And then, of course, I had to go and defend it again. And Phil Pirelli was there. He defended it. And it didn't pass, but least we got it on the floor. So the following year, we put it in again. And we finally got it passed with some minor changes. And but it was a resolution that had to come back the second year. So my last year as the president, we came back to the floor and we lost by 1 vote.
Oh,
So 4 years of trying to get this through. I don't know if we want to try it again and let Bob try it or what. But, I mean, it really it gives you the instant. Like, we did get it back on the floor, which I said, well, I thought that was a goal, and we did do that much anyway. So we were heard, but a lot of Granges don't want to give up that money, I guess. So, but it's an interesting way to do it.
Got it.
Perseverance.
Yes, yes. Noel.
Yeah, Dave, Vince, on yours, with your keywords or that you're saying on your therefore be it resolved sections there, you're saying like support, and in Connecticut, we tend not to use the word support because every time we've had in the past with the word support, that they look for money. You know, they're coming back for you saying, okay, you're going to give us some money for this. Our key word we use is urge, and to urge our legislators to either investigate or, you know, review or that type of thing. And shall is kind of that, to us, that tends to be in a bylaws-y type thing. It's, you know, it's biblical type of thing.
Yep.
We want the flexibility, kind of flexibility we like to have and all that. But our major one is we don't like this people to say support, because if it has been passed, then we'll go to that Grange who wrote the resolution and say, okay, cough up the money because they want money. You know, that's how we look at it in thrifty Connecticut. But just to let you know, you're going to be 13 hours away from the coast when you go to Buffalo, so you're not on the East Coast.
Maybe on the Canadian border. We'll be on the Canadian border.
Before we
Go to
run out of
Norfolk,
time, I wanted to bring up
Virginia
one other
for my
topic.
nephew's wedding.
Yeah. And one other idea, in addition to what Todd and Terry were talking about, another good way to know what's in state law is to recruit state legislators to join your Grange, like we just did, and we just send it and ask, is this state law or not? But one of the questions is, and it's a real world example right now, our state legislator and one of our potential Grange members have something that's being considered in the General Assembly right now that is really going to hurt hemp farmers. And they've asked for a policy position from the community Grange or higher, like Pomona Grange or State Grange. Is there a policy to do something like that if it's consistent with the, like, say, for example, the Connecticut State Grange policy positions or not? How would you go about doing something like that?
The present policy of the Connecticut State Grange for hemp is a commercial growth of hemp for commercial manufacturing products. As far as like cannabis, we're only for medical marijuana is cannabis or oils or all that we support. Our biggest concern, because it's a federal violation, the law of federal for cannabis or for recreational marijuana, is the problem is there's no legal or ramification of CDL drivers. If you do a recreational marijuana and then all of a sudden you get a spot test for drug testing for your CDL license.
So Noel, take it out of that topic and just say you want to take say a Riverton Grange position. We hate stop signs. Stop signs should all be removed. Can we as a local Grange take that position? Can we go to Pomona and ask them to take a position? And can we go to state? Because I'm the legislative chair for our Pomona under Rob. And I was just curious, is that something, because I was so shocked when they said, you really want a Grange position? And they said, when you have organizational positions coming before the state legislative body, it really makes a difference. And I think, Noel, you and I heard that also when we were at Ag Day. So I was just curious, like, I would hate to ever have at least Riverton Grange get out in front on something and say Riverton Grange supports this, so would you check with like you or Rob or Todd or somebody on any topic if they wanted a position?
I would think you'd have to check with either me, see if it's policy, but also with Rob as a Grange, as this president of Connecticut State Grange.
Okay.
It's a slippery slope, and we don't want to get listed as yes in favor or breaking up or fighting amongst ourselves at this present time, because we're not. It's not national Grange policy. So we have to go
on that one topic. Yes,
on that one
agree
topic.
on that one topic.
On those
I'm just
one
thinking,
topics.
yeah, I'm just
It's
thinking
not,
anything,
it's not a
'cause
national Grange topic policy, so
Right.
therefore we'd be violating national Grange policy.
Got it. Okay, any other questions?
Not a question, but just kind of a comment. I do think that Grange members from all the way up through need to be familiar with the digest and the bylaws of the state and the National Grange. They're not the biggest book. It's a quick and easy, 2-night read, one for each one. It's just before Granges write a resolution, they need to, I think, familiar themselves just with what some of the laws and the stance of the Grange is on different things, because that way they're not wasting their time writing these resolutions that are going to get shot down. They should be writing resolutions that have at least a hope of going forward. And I think that all needs to start at the community Grange, the subordinate Grange level. That's
Right.
where the resolutions begin. That's where they should take the initial initiative to do the research and put the time in to see how, make that resolution, like Vince was saying, the best resolution that you can write, and with giving it the best chance to go forward. So that's just my comment. So
No, that's great. That's great.
Yep.
Anything
That's
else?
the idea is I just wanted to add that what Terry said there is really important, that people do their due diligence. And if it does somehow get through that Grange and comes to the committee then needs to do the due diligence and make sure that it's noteworthy or not noteworthy, or, is already policy of the state Grange, the national Grange. That's what your committees are there to do, is to make sure that it all is hunky-dory.
Mhm. And what I was thinking with this too, and correct me if I'm wrong, I have my state lecturer hat on. I would think, like, I know at least my Grange every year, we have a legislative program that my legislative chair, who this year happens to be Phil Prelli, he does a program, he invites somebody to speak with different things. But I think it would be helpful under the lecturer's program to have the legislative people just do a quick thing, maybe pass out what the resolution process is like in the springtime going into September, that the September 15th deadline. Does that make sense to encourage that, maybe also to get lecturers to partner with their legislative committees?
Sure. And it's, you
And
download. the
especially at
Terry
those
said.
times.
Go ahead, Vince.
I was going to say, it's especially, I think, very important that you get those lectures to do it, a good couple of months before those resolutions are to be done and due. Because if you give them 3 weeks to a month, it starts to go really fast.
Got it.
And we always push a resolutions, best time for resolutions is in the winter time when you're trapped in the house, and family activities when you're knitting and making your crafty stuff while you got time, because come spring, you're going to be busy up the wazoo doing your other crafty stuff. So.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to thank Rob. When I called you and said, hey, I have this idea, I got off this National Policy Committee call and you were supportive. You had me talk to Noel. Noel, I want to thank you. You had me talk to Terry and Todd. And then Vince to come on from California and be our guest speaker. We'll at least have to buy you something when you're in Niagara Falls there. I was going to say a drink, but I'm not sure we can do that at a Grange meeting, but I'll buy a Shirley Temple.
You can't buy it at the Grange meeting, but you can buy it in the bar afterwards.
There you go. All right, Vince.
No,
you hold
I
me
didn't
to
say that either.
Thank you for having me. Yep, thank you for having me on tonight. I hope that people learn something, and if I can be of any help, please reach out.
Thanks, Vince.
Thank you.
Rob, did you have a
Thank you.
concluding comment?
Yeah, I was just going to tell Vince that although he's 13 some hours from the Atlantic Ocean, he's on Lake Erie, I believe, which is up there adjacent to New York, which is indirectly connected to the Atlantic. So maybe there's some mixing of waters. You can go stick your hand and their foot in the lake and feel a little bit of the Atlantic coming inland.
Vince, if
I'll
you
give
want to
it
come to
a
Connecticut,
whirl.
I'll host a fellow Californian, okay?
Don't feel bad,
Sounds
Vince.
good.
I went all the way to Washington some years ago, and I have never to the state, Washington State, that is. And I've never seen the Pacific Ocean either, so.
Well, thank you, everybody. You have a good
Yes,
evening,
thank you.
and I know I've
Thank you.
learned something, and I hope you all have, and we'll make this recording available to others. So thank you very much and good night.
Thanks, Dave.